people don't realize that a significant part of the unhappiness in their lives is actually generated by often destructive mind activity.
It's always there, isn't it? The voice in your head. It talks to you when you wake up. It tells you what kind of day you're about to have before you've even brushed your teeth. It replays yesterday's mistakes, whispers fears about tomorrow, and critiques every move you make at the moment. It's always there, persistent, relentless, and frankly, exhausting. But here's the thing. That voice isn't you. The cage of endless chatter. This truth is unsettling at first. After all, we've been conditioned to believe that our thoughts are sacred and that they define who we are. If you think about it, isn't that what every self-help book or well-meaning mentor suggests? Change your thoughts, change your life. But what if the problem isn't your thoughts? What if it's the fact that you're talking to yourself at all? This incessant dialogue, the voice you think is you, isn't a helpful guide or wise counselor. It's a cage, one made not of iron or steel, but of words. And the bars of this cage are built from judgments, fears, complaints, and comparisons. Imagine for a moment you're sitting by a calm, clear lake. The surface is so still it mirrors the sky above, reflecting the infinite expanse of the universe. But then you throw a pebble into the water and ripples distort the surface. Suddenly, the lake can't reflect the sky anymore. The voice in your head is like that pebble, constant, restless, and disruptive. It keeps the stillness away. Your mind is like that overflowing cup. It's so full of its own chatter, its need to label, analyze, and interpret, that it leaves no space for anything new. Not joy, not clarity, not the peace you've been seeking. Eckhart Tolle refers to this as the pain body, describing it as a concept tied to negative emotions and the narratives we internalize. When you replay an argument, imagine worst-case scenarios, or judge yourself harshly, the pain body grows stronger. Over time, it becomes a phantom self, a shadow version of you that lives in fear, doubt, and suffering. Yet this false self feels real, doesn't it? It feels so real that you might mistake it for your true self. After all, who else could it be? But let me ask you this. If you were truly one with this voice, who is it that hears the voice? Pause for a moment and really consider that. Who hears the voice? In the space between those words, you might glimpse something remarkable. You might sense a quiet, observing presence, something deeper than thought, quieter than words, and infinitely more stable than the chatter of the mind. That presence is the real you. In Hindu philosophy, this presence is often described as the Atman, considered an eternal self beyond material turbulence. In Christian teachings, it's akin to the still, small voice of God, ever present beneath the noise. And in the Taoist tradition, it's the Tao, the way that flows naturally, effortlessly, without the interference of thought. The mind resists this truth because it loves its own noise. It wants to dissect, categorize, and control. But the mind's nature is imbalanced. It sways from past to future, from hope to despair, never resting in the now. That imbalance is why we suffer. When you're caught in this imbalance, even small irritations become unbearable. You get stuck in traffic, and the voice in your head spins a story about disrespect, wasted time, or unfairness. You glance at social media, and the voice compares your life to others, fueling jealousy or inadequacy. These aren't the situations themselves causing your unhappiness, it's the thoughts about them. A Course in Miracles puts it bluntly: nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Your thoughts about the world are not the world itself. They are projections, shadows on the wall of a cave, as Plato described in his famous allegory. You can't see the light when you're focused on the shadows. Here's the secret. The moment you stop talking to yourself, even for an instant, the shift begins. You taste freedom. You step out of the cage of endless chatter and into a vast open field of awareness. This doesn't mean silencing your mind by force. Fighting the voice only makes it louder. Instead, it's about becoming aware of the voice without attaching to it. It's about listening to the lake rather than throwing more pebbles. In the words of Rumi, silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation. When you let go of the inner dialogue, you start to hear that silence. It's not an absence, it's fullness, it's peace. You might feel resistance as you begin to practice this awareness. The voice will say, "You can't live without me. You need me to plan, solve, survive." But the truth is, the deeper presence within you knows all this without the noise. Just as the sun doesn't need a clock to rise, you don't need constant thinking to live. As you sit with this idea, let yourself wonder, who am I beyond the voice? Who am I when the mind grows quiet? These questions aren't meant to be answered, they are meant to be lived, to be explored in the stillness that lies just beyond the noise. What happens when you look into a still mirror? You see yourself exactly as you are. No distortion, no embellishment. The clarity is undeniable. But what happens when the mirror is cracked? The mirror of stillness. Your reflection becomes fragmented, untrue, a poor echo of reality. This is what the voice in your head does to your sense of self. It's a cracked mirror offering you distorted versions of who you are. It whispers, "You're not enough. You need to prove yourself. You have to fix this or everything will fall apart." And because this voice is so loud, so insistent, you believe it. But who were you before you learned to listen to this voice? Think back to your childhood. Can you recall a moment when you were utterly present, running through a field, drawing with crayons, or laughing so hard your stomach hurt? In those moments, you weren't narrating your life. You simply were. That's the state of being your true self longs to return to stillness, simplicity and presence. In Buddhism, this state is called sati, or mindfulness. It's the art of being fully aware of the present moment without judgment or commentary. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and attained enlightenment, he didn't do it by arguing with his thoughts. He simply observed them, letting them pass like clouds across the sky. But let's be honest, in the modern world, silence feels impossible. Your phone buzzes, emails pour in, and the world screams for your attention. Even when you try to sit quietly, the inner voice ramps up, filling the silence with its noise. It's tempting to give up, to believe that stillness is an illusion. But here's the truth. The busier your mind, the more desperately it craves silence. This craving for silence isn't new. Thousands of years ago, Lao Tzu wrote, "Do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving until the right action arises by itself?" These ancient words hold a profound key. The more you chase clarity, the further it slips away. True stillness comes when you stop chasing, stop controlling, and simply be. Consider the story of the man who approached a monk, desperate to learn the secret of enlightenment. The monk told him to sit by a river and listen. The man grew frustrated after hours of hearing nothing but the sound of water. "This is pointless," he exclaimed. The monk smiled and replied, "When you stop looking for meaning, you'll hear everything." This story points to a radical truth. Stillness isn't something you achieve, it's something you remember. It's already within you, waiting beneath the noise. But how do you find stillness when the voice in your head refuses to stop? Start by noticing the voice without engaging it. Imagine you're sitting in a theater watching a movie. The scenes unfold on the screen, but you're not part of them. You're the audience, not the actor. The same is true for your thoughts. They play out in your mind, but they aren't you. When you practice this, you might feel a flicker of discomfort. The voice might grow louder, trying to pull you back into its grip. It might whisper, "This is pointless. You're wasting time. You'll never find peace." Don't fight it. Fighting the voice only gives it power. Instead, gently remind yourself that you are the observer, not the observed. In Christianity, this practice is often called a centering prayer. a silent communion with God where words fall away and only presence remains. The mystics spoke of finding the peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that arises not from thinking, but from surrendering the need to think. If this sounds difficult, remember that you don't have to master it overnight. Even a single moment of silence, a breath, a heartbeat, a pause, can begin to unravel the chains of inner chatter. Imagine holding a glass of muddy water. If you keep shaking it, the mud will stay suspended, clouding the water. But if you set the glass down and leave it undisturbed, the mud will settle and the water will become clear. Your mind works the same way. The more you struggle against your thoughts, the more chaotic they become. But when you let them be, clarity emerges naturally. This clarity is where the shift happens. In Hindu philosophy, there's a beautiful analogy of the lotus flower. The lotus grows in muddy water, yet its petals remain pristine, untouched by the muck. Your true self is like the lotus, untouched by the noise of your thoughts, no matter how chaotic they may seem. When you stop identifying with the voice in your head, you begin to experience this purity. You see the world as it is, not as the voice interprets it. A tree is no longer just beautiful or ugly, it simply is. A moment is no longer good or bad, it's simply now. This shift doesn't mean you stop thinking altogether. Thoughts will come, just as clouds drift across the sky, but instead of clinging to them, you let them pass. You stop mistaking them for reality. At first, this might feel like stepping into the unknown. The voice in your head has been your constant companion for so long that its absence can feel unsettling. But as the silence deepens, you'll discover something extraordinary. You'll find that stillness isn't empty. It's full of peace, full of presence, full of life. And as you rest in that stillness, you'll begin to see yourself clearly for the first time, not as the cracked reflection of the voice, but as the unshakable presence behind it. This is the beginning of freedom, the first step out of the cage. In the stillness, you'll realize that the shift isn't something that happens to you. It's something that has always been waiting for you. The voice and the void. There's a profound moment in everyone's spiritual journey when they realize the voice in their head has been living rent-free for far too long. It's like catching an uninvited guest rummaging through your cupboards, making messes and demanding attention. You stop and think, why am I letting this happen? This is the beginning of what some philosophies call the void, the space where the voice no longer holds the power it once did. For many, the idea of this void feels terrifying. If you're not the voice in your head, who are you? What's left when the chatter stops? But what if the void isn't empty at all? What if it's overflowing with everything you've been searching for? In the Taoist tradition, the void is not a barren nothingness, but the womb of infinite possibility. The Tao Te Ching says, "We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want." The void is like that pot. It isn't about what's missing, but about the space that allows life to flow in its fullness. To understand this, imagine standing in a dense forest. The trees are so tightly packed that sunlight struggles to reach the ground. In the same way, your inner voice can become so overgrown with thoughts that it blocks the light of awareness. But when you begin to quiet the voice, you create space. The trees thin out, the sunlight streams through, and suddenly you can see where you're standing. This realization doesn't mean the voice disappears overnight. It's been part of your life for so long that it feels like an old friend, even if it's more like a toxic one. The key isn't to fight the voice, but to stop feeding it. Every time you argue with it, analyze it, or try to control it, you're handing it energy. Instead, try this. Listen to the voice as if it's a radio in the background. It's there, but you don't have to focus on it. You can hear its opinions, its fears, its endless critiques, and then you can let them drift away, just like static fading into silence. In the Bible, there's a story of Elijah seeking God. He expects to find the divine in a great wind, an earthquake, or a fire. But instead, God comes to him in a still, small voice. What if that voice isn't a sound at all, but the profound stillness beneath all the noise? This stillness isn't passive. It's alive, vibrant, and deeply intelligent. It's the source of intuition, creativity, and wisdom, the qualities that get drowned out by the voice's relentless monologue. When you touch this stillness, you begin to experience life differently. You stop reacting to every thought as if it's the gospel truth. Here's an example. Imagine you're walking through a crowded market. The voice in your head might say, "It's too noisy here. I wish it were quieter. Look at that person staring at me. They probably think I look ridiculous." And before you know it, you're tense, irritated, and completely disconnected from the moment. Now imagine the same market, but this time you're observing the voice without engaging with it. You hear it complain about the noise, but instead of agreeing or disagreeing, you simply notice. You see the faces around you, hear the laughter, and smell the spices in the air. The chatter in your mind becomes background noise, and the present moment comes alive. In this state, even chaos feels harmonious. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize practices like meditation, prayer, or mindful movement. These aren't just tools to calm the mind. They're ways to step into the void, to recognize that the voice is not the master of your life. One Zen parable tells of a young monk who asked his master, "What is enlightenment?" The master replied, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The monk was confused. "But doesn't everyone do that?" he asked. The master smiled and said, "No. Most people, when hungry, think of 1,000 things. When tired, they resist sleep with endless worry. Enlightenment is to simply be." This is where the shift deepens. When you stop identifying with the voice, a miraculous thing happens. The fear it creates begins to dissolve. Fear can't survive without constant storytelling. It needs the voice to say, "This might happen. That could go wrong. You're not ready for this." But in the void, there's no room for those stories. There's only now, and now is always safe. Consider a bird perched on a branch. The bird doesn't worry about whether the branch will hold its weight. It simply rests, trusting its ability to fly if the branch gives way. In the same way, the void teaches you to trust, not in the guarantees of life, but in your own capacity to respond to whatever life brings. This trust is the essence of surrender, a concept that mystics and sages have spoken of for centuries. Surrender isn't about giving up, it's about giving in, to the flow of life, to the stillness within, to the truth that you are more than the voice in your head. When you touch this truth, you begin to notice something extraordinary. The world doesn't feel as heavy as it used to. Situations that once triggered you lose their grip. You find yourself laughing at the absurdity of the voice's dramatics. And in its place, you feel a quiet joy, a sense of ease that was always there, hidden beneath the noise. The shift isn't a single moment. It's a process, a journey into the void where the voice loses its hold and you rediscover the fullness of life. The journey is only just beginning. The deeper you go, the more you'll see that the void isn't empty at all. It's the mirror of stillness, reflecting who you truly are, the heart beyond the noise. Have you ever sat in a room full of people yet felt utterly alone? It's not the absence of others that creates loneliness, but the relentless voice in your head that keeps you isolated from the present moment. That voice convinces you that something is missing, that you need to be different, that others don't truly see you. It wraps you in a web of thoughts, cutting you off from the deep connection you crave, not only with others but with yourself. What lies beyond this noise? Something vast, sacred, and profoundly human. The heart. The heart doesn't speak in words. It doesn't argue, judge, or create elaborate stories. Its language is simpler and quieter. It's a pull toward connection, a warmth that flows when you're fully present. But to hear the heart, you must first quiet the mind. In Hindu philosophy, this is the essence of Atma, the soul's connection to the universe. The sages teach that the heart is not just a physical organ but a spiritual center, the seat of true awareness. While the mind chatters endlessly, the heart remains steady, a silent witness to the ebb and flow of life. When you stop identifying with the voice in your head, you begin to hear the heart's whisper, and this whisper holds a truth that no thought can touch. You are already enough. This realization can feel startling at first. After all, the voice in your head thrives on convincing you otherwise. It tells you that your worth is tied to your accomplishments, your relationships, and your ability to meet the expectations of the world. But when you listen to the heart, you see through this illusion. Consider the story of the prodigal son from the Bible. A young man demands his inheritance, leaves his father's house, and squanders everything. Ashamed and broken, he returns home, expecting anger or rejection. Instead, his father welcomes him with open arms, celebrating his return. The story isn't just about forgiveness. It's a parable about remembering your inherent worth. No matter how far you've strayed from yourself, the heart is always waiting, ready to welcome you back. To return to the heart, you don't need to fight the voice in your head. Fighting only strengthens its grip. Instead, you learn to disarm it by shifting your attention. Imagine sitting by a campfire. The flames flicker and dance, mesmerizing and bright. But beyond the fire, there's a vast night sky filled with stars. The fire is your thoughts, compelling but limited. The stars are your heart, infinite and boundless. When you focus on the fire, the stars seem to disappear. But when you lift your gaze, the fire's pull fades, and the vastness of the sky comes into view. The same is true for the heart. It's always there, waiting for you to lift your attention beyond the noise. One way to reconnect with the heart is through gratitude. This isn't the forced, surface-level gratitude of, "I should be thankful for this." True gratitude arises when you pause and feel the miracle of what's here now. The air in your lungs, the warmth of the sun, the sound of a bird singing. Gratitude isn't something you think about, it's something you feel. The Sufi poet Rumi wrote, "Wear gratitude like a cloak, and it will feed every corner of your life." Gratitude quiets the voice in your head because it pulls you into the present moment where the heart resides. Another way to access the heart is through compassion. This begins with yourself. When the voice in your head criticizes you, judges you, or tries to convince you that you're unworthy, respond with kindness. Imagine you're comforting a frightened child. Would you scold them for being scared, or would you hold them gently and tell them it's okay? When you treat yourself with this same gentleness, the voice in your head loses its power. You stop believing its harsh judgments and start seeing yourself as the heart sees you, whole, deserving of love and deeply human. This compassion naturally extends to others. When you're no longer trapped in the voice's stories, you see people more clearly. You notice their struggles, their joys, their humanity. You feel a natural urge to connect, not from a place of need, but from a place of abundance. In Buddhism, this is known as metta, or loving kindness. It's the practice of radiating love toward yourself, those you cherish, and even those who challenge you. The voice in your head may resist this at first, whispering, "They don't deserve your kindness, you'll just get hurt." But the heart knows better. It knows that love isn't something you give or withhold based on conditions. It's who you are. As you rest more in the heart, something extraordinary begins to happen. The world feels lighter. The burdens you once carried, the fear, the doubt, the need for control, start to fall away. You laugh more easily, breathe more deeply, and find joy in the smallest moments. This shift doesn't mean life becomes perfect. Challenges will still arise, and the voice in your head will still try to pull you back into its stories. But now you have a choice. You can listen to the voice or return to the heart. Returning to the heart isn't a one-time event. It's a practice, a dance. Some days the voice will be loud and the heart will feel distant. On other days the heart will shine so brightly that the voice seems to vanish. The key is to keep choosing the heart again and again. As you do, you'll discover something profound. The heart is not separate from the stillness you've been seeking. It is the stillness. It's the place where the voice falls silent and the fullness of life rushes in. It's where the shift becomes not just a moment, but a way of being. This is the heart's invitation, to live beyond the noise, to rest in the truth of who you are, and to let life flow through you with ease and grace. Living the shift. The moment you stop talking to yourself isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning. In that moment you step into a new way of being. You've glimpsed the stillness beneath the noise, felt the vastness of the heart, and realized you are more than the voice in your head. But now comes the real question. How do you live this shift? Living the shift is not about perfection. It's not about silencing the voice in your head forever or never feeling fear or doubt again. The voice will return as persistent as ever, whispering its familiar tales of inadequacy, fear, and separation. But the difference is that now you see it for what it is, a shadow, not your true self. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna advises Arjuna, perform your duty with equanimity, abandon attachment to success and failure. This wisdom isn't about detachment from life, but about living with clarity. When you stop attaching your identity to the voice in your head, you free yourself to live fully, without fear of failure or the need for constant validation. You begin to understand that life is not about controlling every outcome. Instead, it's about showing up in the present moment, trusting the flow, and responding from a place of inner peace. One of the most powerful ways to live the shift is through mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't just a practice, it's a way of life. It's the art of being fully here, fully now. When you're mindful, you don't get lost in thoughts about the past or future. You engage with what's right in front of you, with all your senses, all your attention, and all your heart. Imagine you're drinking a cup of tea. The voice in your head might rush you through the experience, thinking about your to-do list or replaying an earlier conversation. But when you're mindful, you feel the warmth of the cup in your hands. You taste the subtle flavors, smell the aroma, and hear the sound of the liquid pouring. A simple act becomes a profound experience. This is the beauty of mindfulness. It turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. Another way to live the shift is through service. When you stop being consumed by your own mental chatter, you create space to truly see others. You begin to notice their needs, their struggles, and their humanity. Acts of kindness flow naturally, not because you're trying to be good, but because the stillness within you recognizes the stillness within them. In the words of St. Francis of Assisi, it is in giving that we receive. When you serve others, you feel the interconnectedness of all life. You realize that the barriers your mind created, the stories of separation, competition, and scarcity, were never real. Living the shift also means embracing the mystery of life. The voice in your head craves certainty, answers, and control. It wants to know why things happen, where they're leading, and what will come next. But the heart thrives in the unknown. Mystics across traditions speak of surrendering to the mystery. Rumi wrote, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you, and do not worry that your life is turning upside down." How do you know that the side you are used to is better than the one to come? When you live the shift, you stop clinging to old narratives and allow life to unfold as it will. This doesn't mean you stop making plans or setting goals, but you hold them lightly. You trust that even when life takes unexpected turns, it's guiding you toward growth, healing, and deeper connection. As you navigate this new way of being, you may encounter moments of doubt. The voice in your head might say, "This is too hard. You're fooling yourself. Go back to the way things were." But these moments are not setbacks. They are opportunities. Each time you notice the voice and choose not to engage, you strengthen your connection to the stillness within. The great Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki said, "You are perfect just as you are, and you could use a little improvement." This paradox captures the essence of living the shift. You don't have to fix yourself because, at your core, you are already whole. But as you grow in awareness, you naturally align more with the truth of who you are. One day, you'll look back and realize that the shift didn't happen all at once. It unfolded moment by moment, choice by choice. Each time you chose to step out of the voice's stories and into the present moment, you moved closer to freedom. Freedom is the ultimate gift of the shift, not freedom from life's challenges, but freedom within them. When the voice no longer controls you, challenges become opportunities to grow. Fear becomes a doorway to courage. Loss becomes a teacher of love. This is the paradox of the shift. By letting go of the voice in your head, you find yourself more deeply connected to life. You're no longer watching from behind a veil of thoughts. You're fully engaged, fully alive. Remember that the shift is not something you achieve, it's something you embody. It's a way of being, a way of seeing, a way of living. It's the realization that you are not the voice in your head, but the stillness, the heart, the presence that lies beyond it. And in that realization, you discover the truth that has been there all along. You are the shift. You are the stillness. You are the light breaking through the noise. When you stop talking to yourself, the shift happens. And when the shift happens, life becomes a mirror, reflecting back the beauty, the peace, and the love that you've always been. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.